Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our second ever Darn Virtual College Week. We're so grateful to Allie Young with Oklahoma State University and her committee for helping organize this on behalf of Darn. A number of you in the audience may be familiar with Darn's processes and our profile as an organization, but just in case you're not, we are the DFW Admissions Regional Network, a representative of over 70 institutions and over 110 members. We are a very proud organization of regionals based full-time in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with no home campus in this area. So certainly we are a support system for one another as colleagues and professionals and friends, but we are also a professional network existing to primarily serve our counselors, our students, and our families, just like you who are here with us tonight. So certainly in these strange COVID times, we have had to amend and evolve our processes, and that brought us birth this Darn Virtual Week child that we can provide for you today. So we're excited that you're joining us on day one. I will encourage you, our panelists tonight are sort of representative of the larger university model as a whole. They're going to be talking about sort of broad spectrum topics. You are welcome to utilize the Q&A chat features. If you have any sorts of inquiries or questions, I think it's going to be the Q&A feature specifically. But certainly if you have individual questions about recruiters, colleges, universities, we are comprised of a large organization. Like I said, a little bit over 110 of us. And our individual contact information can be found in the Darn booklet. So we would certainly encourage any of you to reach out outside of the panels tonight because we have a number of recruiters that will not be present. But we are really looking forward to discussing these topics with you and diving a little bit deeper into the nitty-gritty of the collegiate search process. I don't think I even said this earlier, but I'm Heather Robinson Lauer with the University of Alabama, representing the Dallas-Fort Worth area out here specifically. I'm recruiting in the Fort Worth and the Panhandle, but in this particular role, I am serving in my second term as the Darn chair. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm going to hand it off to my lovely and deserving colleagues.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank y'all so much for being here with us tonight for our College 101 presentation. My name is Amy Kobuck, and I am one of the regional coordinators for Stephen F. Austin State University and a proud Darn member as well. So I'm going to be sharing with y'all a lot of information just about how to do searches for college, how to be prepared, and hopefully get some of your questions answered this evening. Now, as Heather showed or shared with you just a few minutes ago, Darn is a group of lots of different colleges and universities, some which you see here on this screen. So as you can see, there are quite a bit to choose from. And again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to those colleges directly. But hopefully through this presentation, we will be getting a lot of your questions answered. So I'm going to go ahead and go forward. Again, this is our College Admissions 101 presentation, and we are going to be covering information about the college admissions process, the decision and next steps, as well as scholarships and financial aid. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start and begin with our college application process. So if you've started the application, started looking at that, hopefully this is going to help you move forward and even get more prepared as you move toward college. So the first thing you want to look at is just the college search. That is a huge portion of getting started for college. You definitely want to research schools. And one way to do that is to come to events like you have here tonight. You'll see several of us from different colleges, but then we are also going to be having some presentations over the next few days where you can find out more about specific colleges. So we encourage you to attend those as well. But other things that you can do besides virtual presentations is college fairs. Hopefully, fingers crossed, those will open up a little bit soon, maybe within this next year. You can certainly attend presentations like you are this evening. We encourage you to also search the college websites. There is so much information you can actually find on those college websites about majors, about enrollment, whatever questions you may have. Also, get onto the mailing list. Colleges will send out information. And yes, you may get a lot of mail, but it's information that is going to be providing to you about events going on at that college, or certain maybe camps or things like that that could be a good use for you. Also, check social media. A lot of colleges also have social media sites as far as their organizations and clubs and admissions process that you can get a lot of information from as well. When you're going through and you're looking at different colleges, there are some things you want to consider. Many of us think of a college and they're like, oh, this is the college I want to go to. But have you really looked at that college? Where is that located? What does it look like? Is it something you feel is going to be comfortable for you over the next 4 years? So as you're looking at colleges, some things you want to consider is location. Are you looking for a school that's more an urban location or more a rural area? Some students that live more in a rural area want to get more into a big city, and some vice versa. Some want to stay the same. So each student is different. You really want to think about you and what you want, not what everyone else wants. You also want to look, do you want a public school or a private school? Don't necessarily always push out the private schools, because some students will do that to cost. There's a lot of opportunities there, a lot of great public and private schools both. So definitely take a look at that and look at all your options. Are you looking at large class sizes, or would you prefer a more comfortable smaller class size? You also want to, of course, look at the out-of-pocket cost. That is a big factor and something that you definitely want to sit down and talk about with your family. Make sure you're both on the same page as far as that, so that you can know which schools are the best for you. And then how will that college help you achieve your career goals? Do they have the major you're looking for, the resources that you may be needing? So those are some things that you definitely want to look into. Now, the next thing you want to think about is your major. What are you wanting to do with your life? What career interests do you have? Now, some of you out there may be going, I have no clue. I don't know what I want to do just yet. And that is okay. Many students change their major. In fact, I did. I'm one of those students that changed it 3 times. So sometimes that happens. But then you also have those other students that know exactly what they want to do. So when you're looking at colleges, find out, does that college have something that you are interested in? What majors, what fields are you thinking about? Maybe you want something in business, but you're not real sure what area. Look more into the jobs and opportunities that you can do there. Think about what hobbies you like. Is it something you would think you could do as a career, or is it more just a hobby of yours? One site you can go to is the bigfuture.collegeboard.org, and that will give you some great insight into different college or careers and things that you might need to use or have for those specific careers. You also want to compare your academic interests that are offered at some of your top colleges. The next thing you want to think about is the types of application timeline. Timelines are going to be very, very important for you. One thing that I encourage is to create a spreadsheet, whether it being on Excel or a whiteboard, whatever works for you, and write down the colleges you're interested in. Then start making a checklist of things like deadlines. What is needed for that college? Do they have my major? What are events that are going on? What are those dates? So that you can get as much information as possible. One thing you want to consider when you're doing your applications, however, is the type of application that you're filling out. Some schools have an early decision. A lot of these are going to be those top Ivy League type schools and things like that. Those early decision is binding, which means if you are admitted to that school, you must attend. So if you're not real sure about that school, maybe early decision is not the best option for you. So that is something you want to take into consideration. There's also what's called early action. Early action is not binding, but typically you receive a response a little bit earlier and then have a little bit of time to decide if that's the school you want to attend. You'll also hear the word priority deadline. Priority deadline is usually not mean that you have to have it by that deadline. It's just like there could be some additional benefits, such as scholarships associated with that deadline. Some schools will allow students to, get certain scholarships. Some will allow those students to register early. Each school can be a little bit different. And when you are looking at schools, make sure that you reach out to those schools to get more specific information. You don't want to assume when it comes to college. That's what we're here for as representatives of our universities. So definitely take advantage of the DARN network and talk to the representatives within that school. You also have your regular deadline, which if a school has a specific deadline, make sure you do meet that. If that's a school you're interested in, you do not want to miss a deadline. That could mean if you miss it, you're not going. They will not accept applications after a certain date. So again, that is really, really important. And then you have rolling admissions, which means that you accept applications throughout the year. So again, there are different types of application types. And so you want to make sure you are familiar with what that school has. The next thing you want to look at is the requirements. When you are applying for school, what is needed? When you go to the application, which a lot of applications open up around June, July, you want to again check with your school when that's going to be opening. But there are different types of applications. So there is the common application, which is more of on a national basis. Schools that are out of state may use a common application. Then there's the university specific application, which typically is going to be on that university's website. So if those schools, you want to go to their website, fill out their application. There's also the Texas Common Application. A lot of those is like with Apply Texas. So a lot of Texas schools use that application. You also have the Coalition Application and the Common Black College Application. So again, there are different types. Some schools will allow you to do a couple different options. Some are very specific. So again, make sure you check with that school on what application is needed. You also have an application fee at many schools, and each school is different again. You'll hear that a lot. So each school has a different amount for their application fee. Some are as little as $25, some are as high as $150 to $200. Again, it can vary. And then some do not have application fees. So again, if that's a factor for you, that may be something you want to consider. They also have application fee waivers. Again, not all schools may have that, something you want to check, but many fee waivers could include like an SAT or ACT fee waiver, a NACAT fee waiver, reduced lunch, things like that. So again, you want to check to see if a fee waiver is available and if you qualify. You also want to check about test scores. Now, test scores right now is a big topic. Many schools, because of COVID, have made test scores optional. Now, that does not mean that every school is optional. So again, make sure you check with that individual school, because that is something you definitely do not want to miss if that's something that is needed. If it is test optional, that basically just means it's not required for admissions, but sometimes it's still encouraged if you have taken it, because that could help with certain scholarships and things like that too. We also hear a lot about super score. Some colleges will accept a super score. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically taking the score, the top scores of each subject, and putting them together to make a final score. So for example, if you have taken the SAT maybe 2 or 3 times, they'll take your top reading score from those 3 exams, your top math score from those 3 exams, and then apply those together to give you a new super score. Again, not all schools allow that, so that's something, again, you would want to check with. You also want to make sure you have official transcripts. Now, those do typically need to be official, which means usually it needs to be sent from the school or in a sealed envelope. If you are handed a transcript and then you turn it in, that is typically not considered official. So you want to check and make sure that you do get an official transcript. You also want to make sure you send the transcripts from any dual credit courses that you have. So for example, if you've taken classes at Cullen or you've taken it at the Dallas College, or wherever you've done it, you want to make sure that you get those transcripts in so that the school can also give you credit for any of your dual credit courses. The next thing you want to look at too and consider is your letter of recommendation. So again, you want to, if the school is requiring letters of recommendation, you want to find out how many they need. Maybe if there's something that they're looking for specifically, or people that they don't want you to send letters of recommendation from. But when you're looking at those, typically you want to look at someone of relevance. That means like a counselor, a teacher, a coach, somebody who knows you well. You don't want somebody you've met once. They probably don't know you well enough to give you a good recommendation. And you also, as much as your parents love you, don't have a recommendation from a family member. Okay, we know they're going to glow about you and everything like that as well. We want someone from, again, it could be an employer as well, a pastor, maybe you've done a lot of church or leadership or things like that. There's different people that can certainly give you a great letter of recommendation. You also want to give that person notice. Do not ask them the day before it's due, because they're probably not going to give you the best recommendation that they could. Not because they don't want to give you a good one, it's just they don't have a lot of time. Especially teachers and counselors, they get a lot. So you need to give them sufficient time to get that in. You also have an admissions essay. Some schools do not require that, some do. In the admissions essay, you want to make sure that if there is a specific topic they want you to do an essay on, or specific information that they need in that essay, you want to also make sure it's personal to you. Make sure it's more about you and how you've overcome something, or again, whatever that topic is, you want to make it personal. It's okay to use the same essay for two different schools if those topics are the same, but make sure you specify it for each school. Don't put, I want to go to Texas A&M when you're sending that one to Texas State. So again, you want to make sure you are looking at those and reviewing those as needed. An academic resume is also a great thing to have. That shows what you've been doing in high school, things that you've also maybe accomplished, as far as awards or maybe office positions. Maybe you were a president or a treasurer of a different club or organization. We want to know about you, not just academics, but you. What did you do? What have you been involved in? Did you do community service? Were you working? Were you a tutor? Were you, whatever? There's so many different things that we've seen. It's a time to brag about yourself. Let us know who you are and what you have done. Also, again, any other specific requirements, such as additional applications for like maybe an honors college or an audition if you're wanting to do music or theater or something like that, and maybe portfolio. Some things like interior design or photography, art, sometimes they need a portfolio, so you want to check to see if that's required. You also have the admissions process. So the admissions process, when they go through everything, there's different things that they'll look at. So there is the automatic or assured admission. That means if you meet those set requirements, you're going to be admitted. Those requirements may be based on rank or test scores or GPAs or whatever. If you meet those, you're going to be accepted into that school. There's also the holistic review. That means that if you don't meet that, or if a school, all they do is holistic reviews, it's going to be on an individual review process. So that's when they will look at everything, your transcripts, GPA, test scores, the letters of recommendations, the essays, those resumes, everything like that. So again, those are things that you want to make sure you have and you complete your file with. And then the time frame. We're all anxious. You want to know, when are you going to be able to hear back from your school? When you can be excited and celebrate that. Time frames can certainly vary, excuse me. So you want to, again, check with the schools that you are going through. Some will do it on a rolling basis. So as they get their applications in, they're going to be accepting. Some will have a set deadline of when they do their acceptance and when students will hear back. So again, you just want to check and see what that is. As I mentioned before, make a spreadsheet. I cannot tell you how much this can help you, especially when you're applying to more than one school, because that can all get jumbled in the head. It'll be senior year and you're doing all these other events and things going on, and it can get overwhelming. So that spreadsheet can kind of keep you on track. You want to put things like the name of the school, what type of application, is there deadlines, especially scholarship deadlines, you don't want to miss that, financial aid deadlines, letters of recommendation, are they required, and so forth. So again, there is a lot that you could be adding on there, and maybe some other things that you've thought about. Do they have my major? How far away is it? Whatever is important to you is something you can add to that spreadsheet. Now, the next thing is to the decisions and your next steps. So we want to talk a little bit about that. You want to compare like financial aid packages. We will be talking about financial aid packages in just a moment. My friend Tony is going to share with you more about that. So just stick around and we will answer those questions as well. But you also want to make that decision. So typically May 1st is the National Decision Day. That's coming up for current seniors. So it's their time to make that decision of where they're going to school. So that's something you want to look at. Take everything, if you've applied to 5 different schools and you were accepted to all 5, or you were accepted to 3, or whatever it was for you, you want to sit down with your family and you all decide what is the best option. Which school do you see yourself at those next 4 years? Then once you've made that decision, you want to make sure that you let that school know. So you want to inform the institution of your decision, whether you're attending or not. I get students all the time that are reluctant to tell me, I'm not going to attend here, I'm going here. And I will tell them that is okay. All of us here and every rep you'll talk to will tell you that they will still be happy for you, whether you come to their school or not, because we are here to help support you in making the best decision for you. No one else but you. So let us know, where you're going to be going. We want to celebrate you, whether you're coming to SFA and becoming a lumberjack, or if you're going to University of Alabama. I will be happy for you, and I want to make sure not only that, but you probably don't want to keep hearing from a school that you're not going to be going to. So that way we can update your information. You also want to do any next steps. If that is the school you are going to, wonderful. We definitely want to hear from you then as well. But you also want to make sure, do you need an enrollment deposit put down? If so, when is that due? How much is it? And get that in. When is orientation? Most schools do require you to attend an orientation, so you want to find out about that as well. Housing. A lot of schools also require you to live on campus, so make sure if that's required that you complete that housing application. And then also making sure you accept any scholarships or financial aid. And again, we'll go over that more in a few moments. And then also meningitis vaccinations. Those are important if you are going to be attending classes on campus. Those are required. So make sure that you get those sent in. Now, another thing is when you go to these fairs, we talked about going and doing your research and how to start looking at schools and things that you need to be aware of. There are some things that you can ask. Of course, again, write down things that are most important to you and ask those questions. The general questions, I will tell you, may not get you very much information. I've been asked, well, what's your top majors? Well, I can tell you that, but that's not going to tell you much if that's not one of your majors, because it may not be one of our top majors, but we could have an amazing program in that area. So when you ask that, you can also ask, tell me a little bit more about the education program, for example, or marine biology or engineering. Be specific, because we can give you more specific information. What does housing look like? Is that required? Also, something that the institution prides itself on. What is it, different from another school? Each school is different, has different traditions, different clubs and organizations. So that may be something that's important to you as well. What kind of research does your institution do? If that's important to you. If you're interested in medical school or law school, do you have a pre-professional program that I could be a part of? So those are just some things that you can be looking at. again, think about it, think about what's important to you and ask those questions. The one thing I really want to point out is college is what you make of it. You know, you want to take the time and the effort to go in and find out as much information as you can. I will talk to students all the time, and I've been guilty of this too. You know, families are like, "Oh, you need to go here because this was my school and I love it," and you know, my girlfriend or my boyfriend's going to this school, so that's where I want to go. Well, what if that's not the best school for you? You know, so you really wanted to look at that and find out what is best. Go and check out the schools. Schools right now, some of them are doing in-person tours, some are still only doing virtual, but if you can go in person, go. I can't stress that enough. When you step foot on that campus, you're going to find out, is that the school for me or not? You can also, if you can't go in person, do the virtual tours, because you can also get a lot of great information from that as well. And then attend as many things as you can as far as college fairs, presentations, just to make sure that you have everything you need. Don't be afraid to ask your counselors. They're amazing resources. They have all of our contact information. So if you're like, I want to go to OSU, I need to know who's my contact, they can let you know who that's going to be, and get you that contact information. So make sure that you do ask those questions. And again, this is just some of the schools that we do have. We have quite a few different options, and all of us are local in the DFW area. So it's great. We love coming out to schools, and hopefully we'll be able to come out and visit you in person next year. But right now, I'm going to share it over to my friend Tony, who's going to share with you more about your questions about financial aid and scholarships. Thank you all so much again for coming, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Awesome job, Amy. Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen with you guys. Hopefully this goes right where I want it to. All right, Amy, can you see the PowerPoint? Okay, awesome. Okay, so everybody, let's talk about money. My name is Tony Chandler, and I'm the Associate Director of Admission at Bradley University. And I'm based right here in Dallas, Fort Worth. In case you couldn't tell when I started talking, I'm definitely a homegrown Texan. But part of my responsibility as an admission counselor is I also serve as my students' financial assistance counselor for their incoming year. So we kind of have that one-stop shop model where I wear both hats for them, and I work with families and students on financial aid every day. And so hopefully I'm going to kind of take some of the anxiety away from this topic. If there is something about this that y'all want to talk about more, I will have my contact information at the end of the presentation, and you're always welcome to reach out to me. If I can give you the answer or find someone who can or lead you in the right direction, I'm certainly happy to do that. And of course, I lost my cursor. There we go. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the different kinds of aid. It's all money, but there are different sources, different ways that things get added to an aid award. We're going to talk about scholarships, the FAFSA, and calculating your final cost of attendance. So where does financial aid come from? I mean, it's almost like, where does it not come from? Certainly colleges and universities have aid. A lot of times when I'm visiting with students at their school or at a college fair, they're like, well, do y'all give scholarships? I've never heard of a school that doesn't give scholarships, which is good news, right, for everybody. But it's probably the better question is, how do I get a scholarship from your school? And again, add that to the list of questions that Amy suggested that you guys ask when you're visiting with reps, because schools handle this in very different ways. Some have a separate application, so we'll get into that. And certainly the federal and state government are good sources of financial assistance. Student-focused organizations, and what I mean by that is things that you may be involved in right now at your high school, like FFA. is an excellent source of scholarships for their participating students. DECA is another one that is a very good source of scholarships for students. Nonprofit organizations like LULAC, the Urban League, there are a lot of different organizations that support students in their higher education endeavors. And then, of course, businesses. And we all know about Kohl's and Dr. Pepper, but even smaller businesses and chambers of commerce definitely support those students. So scholarships within the university. When we talk about academic scholarships, you may also hear the term merit-based scholarships. Some schools utilize a separate application for merit-based scholarships so you have your admission application, then you have your scholarship application. Some schools do 2 for 1. Your admission application is your scholarship application. Again, as Amy said, if it's a separate application, there are probably deadlines attached to that. And I would definitely, and sometimes the deadline for the scholarships are actually before the deadline for admission. So you've got to really pay attention to those deadlines. Schools often give talent-based scholarships. Of course, we're in Texas. We all know about athletic scholarships, right? But also if you're in choir or speech or mock trial. There are all sorts of schools out there that will give scholarships. If you're planning to come to our school and participate in those activities, even like, for instance, with choir, if you are not a music major or minor, you still may be able to get a scholarship if you say, yes, I'm going to participate in choir when I get to your school. So definitely doesn't hurt to ask those questions. Check it out. Ask your admission counselor. It's better to ask than to not ask and miss out on something. Some schools also offer legacy or sibling scholarships. So it's important to understand the parameters of that. Like my school, we give it for siblings, parents, and grandparents, not aunt, not uncle. So, definitely it's a good idea to ask. And that usually happens more with private schools, but every once in a while you see a state school that does do legacy and sibling scholarships. So again, never hurts to ask us about that. And then out of state scholarships as well. Several schools have either scholarship packaging or just a flat award because you're coming to their institution and you don't live in the state where it's based. So again, another really great thing to check out. Sometimes there are academic parameters around that. Sometimes they're not. So again, questions. That's all it's about, you guys. So talking about those external scholarships, so scholarships that are not coming from the university, they're coming from organizations, from nonprofits, from businesses, from family trusts. These are 4 of my favorite external scholarship clearing houses, if you will. They are just databases of scholarships. Some of them are going to be applicable to you. Some of them are not. You have to, and this is what I told my own children, this is your new part-time job. You get to go through there and read about external scholarships. I promise you guys, once you do a couple of these applications for external scholarships, you get the hang of it. The questions that they're asking sometimes are very similar, and you can kind of amalgamate one answer and use it in a different one. The other thing I want to point out is I always give the small scholarship lecture. A lot of times people will look at a scholarship that's like $750 or $500 and they're like, that's not even worth my time to do. But I will tell you guys, $500, that's probably a semester worth of books. Okay, so don't ignore those scholarships, because a lot of times other people have that same mindset as you, and they end up being like, my daughter applied for her elementary school scholarship with 3 other people applying, okay, where she graduated with almost 70 kids from that elementary school, only 4 of them applied for the scholarships. So the odds were definitely in her favor on that one. So take a look at those small ones. They spin just like big ones. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears from scholarships to the outcome of the FAFSA. And the FAFSA, first word in that is free. It is the free application for federal student aid. You don't ever want to pay someone to help you complete your FAFSA or to help you find scholarships. You guys can do this all on your own. The tools are there. We are there to support you and help you with this process. But I will tell you that companies that do this to be paid to help you find money, it's not a good thing. So, let us help you. That's part of our job. The FAFSA will open on October 1st of your senior year. It will utilize income information from 2 years prior to the fall you start school. Okay, so wrap your mind around that. Okay, so if you are a junior this year, you are starting college in fall of 2022. It just makes me laugh thinking about that. Okay, and so your income information that you're going to use on your very first FAFSA is 2020. Okay, so we call this prior. So we hop back 2 years, and that's the information that you are going to be using if you're a junior to complete that very first FAFSA. You can find out so much information about the FAFSA at studentaid.gov. That's where, if I've got questions about something, I use that as a resource. It's not just for completing the form, but they've got a whole library of information on there. And you start the FAFSA process on that website. The first thing that you're going to do in the process of completing your FAFSA is apply for an FSA ID. And basically an FSA ID is your electronic signature that you are stating, this is really me. I'm saying this stuff is true. And there you go, send it off it goes. The FSA ID stays with the individual person, or more aptly, it stays with your social security number. So mom or dad, whomever, if you have filed a FAFSA before for an older child or for yourself, you have an FSA ID. You don't need to get another one for this child that's coming up participating tonight that they're in high school. Your FSA ID stays the same. You as the student out there, you need an FSA ID unless you already have one for some reason. I kind of doubt you do, but basically you just need to, validate who you are. My biggest tip on this and in filing the FAFSA and really even applying to schools, do not use your school issued email address. And there are multitudes of reasons for this. Some districts block communication outside of their district. Some schools, when you graduate, they cut off that email address. So how are you going to access this information if it was going to your such and such ISD email address? And also, I think it's also nice to kind of have one email address for college and your FAFSA and everything that you can go to for the next 4 whatever years. So use a username and a password that you'll remember, because think about this, you're only accessing this probably once a year. So it needs to be something really memorable and easy to access. So when you file your FAFSA, what happens? Like you hit submit, and then where does it go? What does it do? So you file your FAFSA, and then they will return information about your EFC, and that's the Department of Education. And I'll go into EFC in just a second. At the time that you're getting that information on your EFC, the universities are getting your FAFSA information, assuming that you coded us in to receive it. Whoever you said can have it, the Department of Education sends that on to us, and we utilize that information to start putting together your financial assistance award. So what is an EFC, and how does it affect the outcome of your award? It's an expected family contribution. And that is basically a calculation that I don't even pretend to understand how it's all calculated, because it's done by people that probably have, way above my pay scale in the Department of Education. And they are using your income, your number of dependents to calculate this contribution. And they're saying, okay, basically based on what you're telling us on your FAFSA, this is what we calculate that your family should be able to pay towards this student's education. They take into account the student's income. Sometimes students, report a pretty hefty income. I saw one today where the student made like $6,000 in 2019. And so that was certainly taken into account, but more often than not, it's the parent or guardian, legal guardian that is factored into this EFC. Another thing that is factored into EFC is number of students in college. So if you are, the second student, you'll have 2 in college at the same time, that will affect an EFC. Conversely, if there are 2 in at the same time and one graduates, and now that student is the only one, you're going to see a change in EFC from there. So it's a little different for every family based on their circumstances. It does stay the same regardless of what the institution costs. Okay, so that's when we get into what is the out of pocket. So your EFC stays the same, and some schools try to meet 100% of need. So they look at that EFC and they say, okay, we can meet 100% of what is not included in your EFC. That's pretty rare. Most of us are out there just trying to do the best we can to meet and make this possible for families. It is not, your EFC does not predict the amount you will pay. It does not, it goes into the amount of aid you will receive, but there are also merit-based factors in there: grades, talent, athletics, choir, all that stuff. So it's not precisely what the aid will be either. And it, like I said, it can change from year to year. That's why we refile the FAFSA every year. It's not a one and done thing. You're going to do it every year as long as you're in school, because what happened in 2020 may not be what's happening in 2022, right? Okay, so who's eligible to file a FAFSA? Basically, if you are a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and you know that about yourself, if you're eligible, if you're filing taxes, or you're eligible to work in the United States, not on a green card, if you have a valid social security number and you've been accepted into a college or university, you are eligible to file a FAFSA. Guys, you also have to register with the selective service once you turn 18. So if you don't turn 18 until, October of your freshman year of college, don't stress about that. Just know that you need to do it moving forward into your sophomore year of college. But guys, if you turn 18, at any point during your senior year, you want to make sure that one of the first things you do is register with the selective service, because we make phone calls and say, hey, we know she turned 18, we need you to do this. So another thing to understand about financial assistance awards, and this is true at most schools, I can't say every school does it this way, but you need to be admitted before we package your financial assistance. Why is that? Well, if you're not admissible, then we just told you we could give you money that we can't really give you because you're not admissible. And that kind of skews with, our awarding systems and things like that. Also, it's a lot of work to put these together. So we want to make sure that students that are admissible are the ones that, we're working hard to get these financial assistance awards to. Now, that being said, sometimes I'll have families say, well, we want to know approximately what kind of aid Caitlin is going to get at your school. That's great. There are two things. Most schools have a scholarship estimator right on their website. So if you just go to, whoever.edu and type in scholarship estimate, cost estimate, you're going to pull that up and you can go in and start plugging things in, and it will tell you at least a cost estimate. Also on FAFSA, there's something called the FAFSA forecaster that you can go in and plug that in. Now, again, these are forecasts, these are estimates. They are not 100% precise, but it does give you a good idea. So what do we need to complete the FAFSA? Correct social security numbers for the student and the parents. This tends to be the big sticking point where we transpose numbers, or dad accidentally puts his own social security number in for the student. It's not, a total deal breaker. It just creates some confusion and we have to go back and fix that. So better to take your time and do it correctly at the beginning so we can avoid that confusion. Correct birthdays, correct addresses, correct marital statuses as of the date of filing the FAFSA. So for instance, a couple of weeks ago, I had a student who they filed the FAFSA as if they were divorced, but in 2019, they were not divorced. They're divorced now. So we had to go back and kind of look at that and fix it because, it wasn't correct. It changed some things. And of course, the household size, the number of dependents. That means legal dependents. I know that in every family, it seems that, someone's helping grandma, or they're helping aunt, or they're helping their grown adult child who doesn't live with them anymore. I get that. We all have those familial things that are going on, but we're talking about legal dependents that are under your household. Okay. All right, so I told you all about some common FAFSA mistakes. This time of year, I'm just, like FAFSA mistakes are pretty much my world. So you'll have to bear with me if I kind of am like, yeah, I just had this happen 5 minutes ago, because it probably did. Students go in, families go in and they do their FAFSA and they don't hit submit. It happens. Okay, so make sure you hit submit. Make sure double check those birth dates, social security numbers, and email addresses. Just last week, I had a student that was like, why have I never heard anything from Bradley about my financial assistance award? And I go in and I look, and it's because on their FAFSA, they had transposed their email address. They messed up their email address. We had it right in our communication system, but the way we communicate about financial assistance awards is directly what you put on your FAFSA as your contact information. So it was just sitting out there in limbo. Okay. Be sure you go in and add the schools you want to receive your FAFSA. This is super important. If you all of a sudden wake up in, February and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to go to XYZ school. I'm going to apply. Okay, I'm applying. Go in at the same time and add them to your FAFSA. You haven't been admitted yet, but at least go ahead and add them in so that when you are admitted, they will automatically receive your FAFSA. Because I guarantee you, one of the number one things, especially with students that are applying a little later in the cycle, is that they forget to go in and take care of that FAFSA. So we're hunting them down, trying to get those FAFSAs added. Incorrect tax information and failing to sign the FAFSA. So again, going back to that FSA ID, I don't even know why you can submit a FAFSA without being able to sign it, but it happens somehow. I'm not really sure. So just double check, take your time. Make sure, have a couple eyes, look at everything, make sure everything's okay before you hit send. Okay, so how do we avoid using incorrect tax information? And I've had this happen too, where a family said that they made $1 million more than they actually make. And, that was a pretty big difference. So we had to go back in and fix that. So the best way to avoid that particular error in the tax information is to use the data retrieval tool. So the data retrieval tool basically goes into the IRS database and grabs your tax identification and auto-populates it in your FAFSA. So pretty much a sure thing. If the IRS says that's what you made, then that's what your FAFSA says you made. So it takes out that process of possibly transposing numbers or adding an extra zero that was not supposed to be there. Okay. All right. So we did all this work for the FAFSA, Tony. Now, what comes of this? Okay, so basically we're looking at loans, grants, scholarships, and work-study employment. So I talked about the scholarships earlier, and scholarships are generally not an outcome of a FAFSA. But some schools want you to file a FAFSA in order to receive scholarships from them. Again, another good question to ask. Some schools will want it, some schools will not. You know, it's totally up to you. But loans, grants, and employment are the three most common things that I deal with in a student's financial assistance award as a derivative of their FAFSA. So loans, okay, I always, just to break the ice with my families, I always say, you know, you don't have to thank me for the loans. I know you're really excited. And that's because no one ever thanks you for loans, but they're a tool. They're just an element, whether it's a student loan, which is also called a Stafford, or the Parent Plus loan. Loans can be the difference maker between what you have and what you need. Now, that being said, do I want students to be really smart and families to be really smart about borrowing? Absolutely. But the Stafford, for instance, is capped for an incoming freshman at $5,500. So it's not like under Stafford, they're going to say, hey, Caitlin, would you like to borrow $20,000 for your freshman year? They're not going to do that. The federal government has capped that for freshmen, and then it goes up a little bit each year. So, you know, be smart about the loans. Don't hate them because they're there, because you can always make them go away, but understand that they're a tool. Grants are free money. It's gift aid, like scholarships. Awesome. So the Pell Grant is probably one that, you know, a lot of people ask me about. That is a federal grant. It is reserved for families of highest need, students of absolute highest need. Some states offer grants, like in Illinois, where my school is located. We have a MAP grant for certain students, you know, so depending, usually it's a home state thing. So we don't give a MAP grant to a student from Texas coming to Illinois. It's a home state situation. Louisiana has TOPS. There are all sorts of things for different states. So if you're planning on staying in Texas, you need to talk to a Texas school and find out about that. And then institutional grants. You know, when I tell people that I work for a private school, their initial response is, ooh, that's going to be expensive. But, you know, schools have ways, things like institutional grants, things like extra scholarships, that you would be amazed at how we can work to make things affordable, whether we're a public school or we're a private school. So definitely check into that. And then federal work study. Federal work study just means that the federal government is paying our institution to pay you to work on campus. Anybody who's eligible to work in the United States can have a job on campus. I was not under federal work study as a student, and I sat right next to a student who was. We did the same job for the same pay at the same hours. So it's not a different kind of job. It's just, and you don't really need to worry yourself about this, but it's just who's paying you, you know, is it the federal government paying the school to pay you, or is it just the school paying you? And that's the only difference. No big deal. Okay, so here's some frequently asked questions. Do I need to file a FAFSA if we don't think we're going to really get anything from it? Well, I always tell families it's not a huge time consuming thing. It's free. I would encourage you to go ahead and do it. You never know, especially in these crazy times. You may not think you need those Stafford loans, but maybe you will. And so wouldn't it be great to have those at your disposal should it come, you know, June and you're like, oh, we're going to need those. Another thing is, like I mentioned earlier, some schools require that you have a FAFSA on file to receive any merit-based scholarships. Again, that's not super, super common, but it does happen. So my general answer to this is, yeah, go ahead and do it. It's not going to hurt you. Okay, so we're going to roll this back. Yeah, so what if my income in 2020 looks different than it does moving forward? So think about the dates. So basically, whatever your FAFSA said in 2020, that picture is a lot better than whatever is going on today. First of all, I'm sorry for that. Second of all, every school has a special circumstance appeal, whatever. This is when you need to reach out to your admission counselor and say, hey, 2020 was great. And, shortly thereafter, we had a job loss, or we had a massive medical expense, or something like that. How can that be taken into consideration? And again, we want to know the full picture. So reach out to your admission counselor and let them know that. And of course, the divorced family question, the family that has the family member that's provided the most care for you financially in the last 12 months would be the one who you use on the FAFSA if your parents were divorced, right? Were divorced in 2020 and are still divorced. And if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to walk you through it, because that is a complicated concept for most families. And so we can walk through it and try to discern what's the best way to go about that. Okay, so let's talk about cost of attendance. Again, I mentioned to you guys that, I work for a private school. Initially when people hear private school, they see dollar signs dancing in front of their eyes. I get that. If you stopped at the total cost of attendance, okay, the stated cost, the sticker price of a school, it kind of takes your breath away. It's like, who in the world is whipping out their checkbook and writing a check for $50,000? Probably doesn't happen too often, but you have to let that process work for you. Okay, so don't stop at the stated cost of attendance, because that is not the real situation at any one of our schools. That is not what's happening. So let the scholarships work for you. Let the grants, the loans, the whatever come into play, and then make your decision. So this is actually here, and I'm going to shrink this so I can see. This is actually one of my students from last year's Financial Assistance Award and 2 other schools that he was looking at. And I give this spreadsheet to my students so that they can kind of line things up and see for themselves actually what's going on. I'm a very visual person, and this helps me help them even. So we're looking at a private school, an in-state public, and an out-of-state public. And then we applied what aid and scholarships he was being given. And so if you look across, that first school initially looks really expensive. But if you drop down to the remaining cost, the out-of-pocket cost, that school just became the second most affordable, based on, the aid that was awarded. So moral of the story, let that process work. Don't just look at that sticker price and go, yep, nope, that's not going to happen, because you might be pleasantly surprised what schools are willing to do for you to help you. Okay, whoops, I forgot about my arrows. There we go. Okay, so again, with cost of attendance, if you have questions, if you want to talk about it, that is always a good conversation. When I have a student text me and say, hey, Tony, can we talk about my financial assistance award? Yes, let's talk about it, because this is a big adult decision with big adult price tags attached to it. So we want to make sure that you feel good about it and you're an informed consumer. But even past the cost of attendance, don't forget to look at the value of that school's education. Don't forget to look at those things that, maybe making it worth maybe that extra dollar. So remember the student I told you that his award, and that's the one, even though we were not the cheapest option for him, he ended up with us because he saw the value in it. His parents saw the value in it and the desire and the opportunities. And that's true for every school out there. It is a good fit for someone. It could be a good fit for you, even if it's not the cheapest school. There's that value attachment to it that you need to take into account. Okay, so wrapping up, this is, wow, I am right on time. This is my contact information. You guys are welcome to take a screenshot of that or whatever. If I can help, if I can guide you to some resources, I'm super happy to do that. I don't have all the answers, but I will try really hard to get answers for you guys, or at least some resources that you can read about. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and come back to you. And thank you guys so much for listening to all about the FAFSA and aid and scholarships. Welcome to my world. It's been fun to share it with you.
Thank you all so much for attending this evening. So excited to kick off the Darn College Week with you all. We have more information. I think really quick we can get posted in the chat. We have posted in the chat the rest of our schedule for the week. So we are looking forward to seeing you throughout the rest of the week. A huge thank you to Amy Kobuck and Tony Chandler for sharing their expertise. And we are looking forward to seeing you later this week. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening.